All right, we're right at 6 o'clock. So as our late arrivers are logging in, I'm going to go ahead and start the introduction to the Writers Center real quickly. Nothing that's essentially important for understanding the event, but allow our latecomers to log in while I'm sharing a little information about who we are. My name is Zach Powers. I am a white male with brown hair and brown beard, currently sitting in front of a bookshelf full of primarily fiction books. And I am the artistic director of the Writers Center. So I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us this evening for this wonderful, wonderful event. I did see a lot of emails that I didn't recognize when I was pulling the registrations for this event. So it means I get to share a little bit about the Writers Center with some people who maybe don't know what we are. We are a literary arts nonprofit headquartered in the Washington, D.C. area, and we support writers and everyone who wants to write. Two of the main ways we do that are through hundreds of creative writing workshops every year, which you can check out on our website, writer.org, which I'll share in the chat window in a minute. And you can also check out our free events, such as this one. So if you're interested in what we have going tonight, we really encourage you. I hope this isn't the last time we see you, if this is the first time we see you. We have so much other great programming coming up. Our next event is on Thursday. It's fiction. I know we have a lot of poets here, but hopefully you'll be interested in that and some of the other things. We have several really amazing poetry events scheduled as well in the weeks and months ahead. So please go to our website and check out everything that we have to offer. I'm so excited whenever I see new faces joining us for the first time. That's the Writers Center in a nutshell. I should mention, most importantly, is we're also the publisher of Poet Lore. Poet Lore is America's oldest poetry magazine. It's in its 132nd year of continuous publication. So if you are a poet and looking to read some good poetry or perhaps submit your own work, we strongly encourage you to check out Poet Lore's website, which I'll also put in the chat window, which is poetlore.com. And Poet Lore will be opening for submissions on April 1st, so just a few days away from our next open submission period. So please check that out. We'd really love to see your work in the submission queue. So that's us. That's the Writers Center. That's Poet Lore. It's now my pleasure to welcome one of our favorite collaborators to introduce this event proper, Francisco Aragon, who is a professor at the University of Notre Dame, who does Letras Latinas, which is an initiative within the University of Notre Dame promoting Latinx poetry and writing throughout their community and beyond, and is just a force of nature in everything poetry and has brought so much great programming to us. It's always a pleasure when he gets to join us. So I'm excited now to hand off to Francisco. Francisco, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Zach. As Zach mentioned, my name is Francisco Aragon. I am wearing a green shirt, glasses. I am in my office at the University of Notre Dame. You can see some brown bookcases behind me. As Zach said, I direct Letras Latinas, which is the literary initiative at the University of Notre Dame's Institute for Latino Studies. Letras Latinas is a founding member of the Poetry Coalition, which is a national alliance of organizations working together to promote the values poets bring to our culture and the important contribution poetry makes in the lives of people of all ages and backgrounds. Tonight's program is a joint collaboration with the Writers Center and is part of the Poetry Coalition's 2022 program titled The Future Lives in Our Bodies, Poetry and Disability Justice. The model Letras Latinas has been carrying out for its Poetry Coalition programming these past 2 years has been to commission an artistic director to conceive of and design a poetry program in sync with our topic. This year, as mentioned, our topic is disability justice. Our artistic director for the evening is poet and scholar Heidi Andrea Restrepo Rhodes. I've had the pleasure of working with Heidi in various capacities since 2018, the year the poet Ada Limon selected Heidi's manuscript as winner of the 8th edition of the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize, a Letras Latinas program that supports the publication of a first book by a Latinx poet residing in the United States. Limon calls Heidi's book, The Inheritance of Haunting, a brutal but necessary unveiling of violence and the ghosts we carry with us daily. She goes on to call it a book that sings the unbearable and still makes a claim for survival. She says, "These are intricate poems that are odes to the women who have come before us, odes to the women who have been silenced by fear, with language that is alive, inventive, sound-driven, and ricocheting with power. This is a fierce and breathtaking collection that risks calling for a great reckoning with our collective past." Before I pass the baton on to Heidi, I want to take a moment to express gratitude. I'd like to thank Zach Powers of the Writers Center for our continuing collaborations. I also want to acknowledge our funders. Tonight's program was made possible in part with funds from the Academy of American Poets provided by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And finally, Letras Latinas would not be able to carry out its mission without the generosity of its individual donors. Thank you. And now, without further delay, please welcome Heidi Andrea Restrepo Rhodes.
Thank you so much, Francisco. That was such a beautiful introduction. I'm really grateful. Hi, I'm Heidi. I'm a brown queer person with long dark hair wearing a black shirt, 2 nose rings, stud earrings, and behind me there's a light green curtain, a couple plants, and some books. I want to begin by first saying that this event is being closed captioned with a live transcript. So if you would like to access that feature, you can turn that on at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We also have an access document if you want to read along with the panelists who have provided their poems for this purpose. And thank you, Zach, for dropping this in the chat box. And Zach's going to be dropping other relevant links into the chat box throughout the night. So check those out. If anybody can't access the chat box tonight for any reason, you can email me at heidiarhodes@gmail.com, and I'll send you a list of the links that will have been shared. Welcome to Atlas, Skin, Bone, Blood, Body Maps in Brown and Black, a reading and conversation about Latinidad and disability. Joining us tonight to share their work are Diannely Antigua, Ximena Lucero, Aurora, Levins Morales, and Naomi Ortiz. I want to say thank you to Francisco Aragon and the Letras Latinas team at the University of Notre Dame's Institute for Latino Studies for commissioning me to imagine up and convene this event. And thank you to Zach Powers and the team at the Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland for hosting us tonight and for all of the support in making this event happen. And I want to share that as a kind of extension of this event and the themes, there will be a special themed folio published sometime this year. So if you're interested in submitting to that, please keep an eye out for a call for submissions. And you can follow me on Instagram at vessels.we.r, that's ARER, for updates on that. So our program for this evening will be as follows. I want to give some opening remarks, then introduce each panelist before they read. And after the readings, hopefully, we will have time for questions from the audience and dialogue on some of the themes for tonight. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. For those not familiar, a land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land, people with enduring relationships to it. Colonialism is an ongoing process, and for those of us who are not Indigenous, we need to build mindfulness of our present participation in this process, to reflect on what it means to occupy space on Indigenous lands, and to offer gratitude and solidarity. The Writers Center, our host for the evening, is located on the traditional homeland of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway tribes in what is otherwise known as Bethesda, Montgomery County, Maryland. The land of present-day Montgomery County and Washington, D.C. is most closely associated with the Nacotchtank tribe who lived on the Maryland side of the Potomac River. Due to settler colonial violence, genocidal tactics, and biological warfare in the 17th century onward, the Nacotchtank were forced to flee, seek protection with, and join the Piscataway. Today, the Piscataway tribe is active in the state of Maryland. There are two major groups that have formed to represent the Piscataway tribe: the Piscataway Indian Nation and Tayac Territory, and the Piscataway Conoy tribe, further subdivided into Piscataway Conoy Confederacy and subtribes, and the Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians. We encourage you to read more about their history and present work for Indigenous justice. The use of land acknowledgements is often critiqued as an empty gesture that provides institutions some alleviation of guilt rather than an active opening for solidarity. With the aim of offering more than the acknowledgement itself, we are making a land tax donation to the Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, and I want to invite you all to do the same within your means. What is a land tax? Our rent and mortgage payments give us access to living space. Voluntary land taxes recognize our access to stolen Indigenous land, acknowledge the United States' unpaid debts, and offer wealth redistribution as one kind among many possible routes of solidarity with Indigenous people. And I believe Zach has dropped some links for that if you want to check that out. If you can't access the text in the chat box, you can go to www.piscatawayindians.com/projects and scroll to the bottom of the webpage for the PayPal link. Thank you, Zach. So about our theme for tonight, it feels deeply important for there to be more funded spaces where disability poetics and politics can be explored and cultivated beyond and outside of the ways disability arts and justice spaces have often been dominated by whiteness. My hope is that our time together this evening may be one such offering. With this year's Poetry Coalition theme, The Future Lives in Our Bodies, which comes from Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasina's poem, Femme Futures, we are elaborating on conversations already so central and vital to queer and of color disability justice work. In conceptualizing this event, I'm thinking about disability and Latinidad in their most expansive forms, more a set of complex and fluid relationships to body, space and language, place and land, memory and inheritance, politics and history, rather than hard-limed prescriptions of identity. Following numerous scholars, artists, and activists in feminist disability studies and radical disability justice movement, I understand disability as a social historical system of exclusions based on human difference and organized through normative notions of ability and capacity of body and mind. As Rosemary Garland Thompson has noted, disability, similar to race and gender, is a system of representation that marks bodies as subordinate, rather than an essential property of bodies that supposedly have something wrong with them. I want to pose Latinidad, or being Latinx or Latine, following Jose Esteban Munoz, who suggests that it is both a contentious and capacious term. Latinidad, then, is an irregular formation, full of limits and possibilities, that is ever shifting and that has served historical and current systems of racial subjugation, as well as liberatory and strategic purposes for the work of solidarity within and between certain communities. There are important points of affinity in thinking Latinidad and disability at their intersections. Both have been brutally subject to the violences of capitalism, colonialism, and eugenicist thought globally, as well as within the US as empire. Both Latinx and disabled people are often conceived of through white supremacist and ableist thought and social arrangements as disposable, as having no value, no future, or often as having value only insofar as we remain productive under capitalism's imperatives. We've seen how this violence is ongoing, for example, in social and government response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disproportionately impacted disabled people and people of color. But many of us are in a unique position to respond to these inequities as people too intimately familiar with these structures of violence, as poets and thinkers, who are called to transform the political and poetic landscape through our word and work. The title and framing of this event are inspired by an essay by Aurora Levins Morales titled Mountain Moving Day in her book, Kindling Writings on the Body, published by Pamet River Prize in 2013. She writes, "What our bodies, my mother's and yours and mine, require in order to thrive is what the world requires. If there is a map to get there, it can be found in the atlas of our skin and bone and blood, in the tracks of neurotransmitters and antibodies. We need nourishment, equilibrium, water, connection, justice. When I write about cancer and exhaustion and irritable bowels in the context of the treeless slopes of my homeland, of market-driven famine of xenoestrogens and the possible extinction of bees, I am tracing that map with my fingertips, walking into the heart of the storm that shakes my body and occupies the world." Our bodies tell stories, carry historical memory, bear the intergenerational traumas and forms of resilience we've inherited from our ancestors. Our bodies share ways of knowing and being with and as a part of the planet's vibrant human and more than human ecologies. The memory of land and what our bodies carry are deeply intertwined. In the ongoingness of settler colonial violence, our bodies, selves, land, communities, and life itself are variously entangled with, subjected to, and complicit in its persistence through extractivism, exploitation of land and labor, and racial carceral systems that both debilitate us and produce ideas about which bodies matter. Tonight, we address these themes at the intersections of Latinidad and disability to put forth the poetics of Black and Brown racial and disability justice. Through poetry and reflective discussion, we ask, what storms shake your body and occupy the worlds of you, the worlds you are, and the worlds you live in and move through? What are the relations between geography and corporeal experience that illuminate what is vital and necessary about solidarities between the work of racial justice and disability justice? What stories do you need to tell about how your body carries the land and how the land has carried your body? What maps to history and to liberatory futures are found in the atlas of your skin, bone, and blood? I deeply believe in poetry's capacity to explore, experiment with, and respond to these questions. Our panelists tonight are all writers whose work I admire and who are changing the social and political landscape through their poetry and essays, visual and media arts, activism, and liberation movement work. It is such a joy and honor to have you all here. Thank you for joining me. We'll begin with a reading by Diannely Antigua. Diannely Antigua is a Dominican American poet and educator born and raised in Massachusetts. Her debut collection, Ugly Music, published by YesYes Books in 2019, was the winner of the Pamet River Prize and a 2020 Whiting Award. She received her BA in English from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, where she won the Jack Kerouac Creative Writing Scholarship, and received her MFA at NYU, where she was awarded a Global Research Initiative Fellowship to Florence, Italy. She is the recipient of additional fellowships from CantoMundo, Community of Writers, Fine Arts Work Center Summer Program, and was a finalist for the 2021 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellowship. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and chosen for the Best of the Net Anthology. Her poems can be found in Poem a Day, Poetry Magazine, the American Poetry Review, Washington Square Review, the Adroit Journal, and elsewhere. For more information, visit www.diannelyantigua.com. Her book, Ugly Music, can also be found at bookshop.org, among other places. So here is Diannely.
Thank you so much, Heidi. My name is Diannely Antigua, and I'm coming to you from my sunny little kitchen. I am a brown, queer Afro-Latina. I'm wearing a Selena shirt today in honor of this reading with other Latinx folks. My hair is big and curly, and I'm also wearing a nose ring. And I'm just so happy to be here today with all y'all. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Francisco, Letras Latinas, Academy of American Poets, and the Poetry Coalition. I'm going to be reading a few poems for you. This first poem is about having discovered, or even just, I shouldn't say discovered, but just coming to the realization of my disability when I was a young girl at 16. Chronically. It started when I was 16. After, instead of falling in love with Jesus, I fell in love with a boy. A little bit of God's wrath now living in my right shoulder, right hip, right side of my newly kissed neck. I knew he was jealous. God, not the boy. Maybe because instead of reading a chapter in Proverbs before bed, I spoke to the boy on the phone, whispering, my body cramped in the dark corner of the living room, my family already asleep. I told the boy I loved him, like a breathy hallelujah, like the hush of the MRI machine taking me into its mouth, or the x-rays, or my silent bending over in the blue paper gown, my ass out in front of the doctor as he checked my spine. And the boy touched my spine too, as he reached under my shirt, unhooked my padded bra. This was before the diagnosis, the word itself sounding like a disease. Diagnosis, how it shares the first three letters of my name, diagnosis. If I could take my tiny shovel hand and carve out the synapses from my head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Oh, bless, bless. It is meaningless how invisible the body in pain when God is a house I can't leave. This next poem is about my mother, I know, coming to the US for the first time, and she was obsessed with the movie Grease, and she almost named me Sandra after Sandra Dee. In the country where my parents met in a taxi cab. I was almost named after the woman who put out a cigarette with her red high heel. It's the carnival scene. John Travolta on his knees, worshiping her black spandex pants and red belted waist. It was the first movie my mother watched in America. She didn't speak English. I didn't eat the beans from the school cafeteria. They were never served with rice, just a hot dog. But I learned that an A in spelling equaled coupons for free cheesy breadsticks at Domino's. And I learned that hair wasn't supposed to smell like fried pork chops when the white kids formed a line to whiff my braids. When my cousin and I played American, she'd grunt and move her tongue, make weird sounds. I'd pretend not to know English. Then we'd buy too many things with Monopoly money and stuff them into plastic bags. When Grease came on TV, my mother would hum the songs. You're the one that I want. Ooh, 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 honey. My lips to the screen. I'd breathe a name into the fog, the smoke crushed under a foot. I have 2 more poems for you. And both of these are diary entry poems that it's a form that I've come up with. I've written in journals since I was 9 years old, and I've filled about 36 of them since then, which means a lot. And I've written collage poems using these journals. So I'll take one journal, collect lines, and write a collage poem using only those lines. So I have 2 of these for you. The first one is diary entry number 13. Being sick is a romantic idea. It was the summer of pain, the summer of becoming the rhythm of spasms down my cervical spine, calling it a reunion of ache. I remember the unbuttoned shirt felt like a grave, and the grave felt like practicing the Bible in a basement, or like being Achilles in reverse. I was strong from the ankles down, from my shallow baptism in the Atlantic. As a child, I'd heard a story about an angel so beautiful, she was evicted from heaven by the others, made to live out her days trapped in flesh, as she lay confined to a hospital bed. I'd like to pretend God called on the phone every day, a worried father, or perhaps disguised as a nurse, brought her water and pills. To say, I'm not afraid of dying, is to admit I want to be stared at like something to lose. I thought I could leave with the dignity any breaking woman would want. I haven't been sleeping or walking or kissing the people that I love. Sometimes my lips will graze an ear, a freshly shaved neck. Okay. This last one is diary entry number 34, epigenetics. I guess before I read this, I do want to say, especially during March, and it's, Women's History Month as well, I want to dedicate, the reading tonight, my reading, to the women in my life who've been so influential, especially my grandmother, Mama, who, is now not with us, but she is the reason for all of these poems. So these are all for her. Diary entry number 34, epigenetics. It's been 8 years, and the ancestors and me are still burdened. I don't know if I am gentle with them. I reheat the coffee in the microwave and find gratitude when they take what's theirs and leave the rest. There will always be scarcity, less food, less Klonopin, which is to say, I own a legacy of fear. Tonight, another grandmother is dying, and I cannot heal her. But I line up my idols like bruises on my belly and perform a nostalgic ritual. I shower with my clothes on, like I did as a girl with a man who wanted to be my father when I became a little bird, helpless to affection. Did he make me a good monster or a bad one? I can keep my cage clean and wipe my mouth with my thumb. Thank you so much.
If you're on screen and want to clap, please do. That was stunning, Diannely. Thank you so much. That last image too, I think is just going to stay with me for a long time. And there's also a lot that resonates in my own experiences of chronic illness and pain. Thank you. So next up, we have Ximena Lucero. Ximena is a poet, actor, and cultural worker. Her short film, Silver Femme, screened at the 59th Ann Arbor Film Festival, Outfest Fusion, and Inside Out Film Festival. Ximena's work is rooted in trans liberation, disability justice, and future building. Here's Ximena.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm going to read 4 poems, and this is the first one. Looking at the target. I am safe, I tell myself. A small lie I repeat to get myself to sleep. I untense my body in my home, though it is just an apartment. Oh, wait, I apologize. I did not do a visual description of myself. I am Ximena. I am a brown trans woman. I am sitting on a cream-colored couch, and I have a animal print jacket and some like red lipstick. Sorry about that. I will start again. Looking at the target. I am safe, I tell myself. A small lie I repeat to get myself to sleep. I untense my body in my home, though it is just an apartment I rent. Realistically, I face violence from my landlord, where I have to pay rent, where I fear one day not being able to pay. I am a survivor as long as I survive my current circumstances. If I don't, then I become a story of the past. Chronic pain impacts how I exist in the world, but I still feel shame when I can't produce art. There is no energy. I refuse production, even if I'm less popular, if less in demand. The shame doesn't help. Anger could be a more useful technique. I become angry at the systems that create the living conditions of people like me. I used to think technological advancements were a sign of improvement, but technology has strict perimeters that concern surveillance and white imaginations. I am safe, I repeat. I walk in the street alongside histories that try to be erased. I only recall stories told to me by kin. The next poem is Then, Here, and Will Be. On Julio Rivera's corner, magical winds blew. It was summer pride. The sky was jeweled and gay. Queens, with its savory kitchens and green cemeteries, can be quiet, also subtly flashy. There is a mapping to our liberation in our neighbors. On the radio, they mentioned the opening of Glitz. The streets read with critiques of capitalism in graffiti. Organizers at the HIV testing center distribute condoms. Fruit stands pop art by the train station. Big blueberries for $2. I am sometimes blue. Then I remember the time I saw a trans elder riding her bike and smiling. Behind her, her lover. I was on my walk and carried a fallen star magnolia. The past route always finds me. The past route always leads me here. Two more poems that I will read. This is Infinite. I text my ancestors for guidance through these planetary griefs. There is no response. I go out in public and cis people tell me I risk my visible self too much, but I think I'm just coexisting. Earth practices liberation. This is how I've led my body. Naturally, I am bold. The weeds spread out. I blow the dandelion's head, making wishes to reconnect with a lost part of me. When I can, I am gentle with isolation. Between the onlookers who pass me is a distance. The spine reigns. I itch. My legs, meadow hairs. I hate it some days. I swallow slowly. My face fires. A part of me is always missing. What? I don't know. Fear keeps me away. Still, I will bloom time from now. This last poem that I'm going to read is one I'm more excited about because it's a new one. And recently I've just been writing about the women that I grew up around. And this is about one of the women I grew up around. You will see. The apartment has been dirty and I cannot get myself to clean it. I am too tired to speak of the pain, so I just let myself be. I should care more, I tell myself, but I cannot force it. My bed has not been cleaned. It smells of rot. The sheets are moldy. When my man comes home, I cook for him. He is rarely present. He is a ghost of flesh. My kids color the walls, and I don't care. It is not my home. My home is far from me. I have been neglected. There is a honeycomb forming above my bed. The bees buzz. My language is silent, and for that reason, I am talked about. I am a bad example to my children. I do not care to defend myself. I will take my children wherever I go, to the hill where my body is free. You will see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ximena. If you're on screen, please feel free to show the love. That was so beautiful. And I'm just thinking about these lines that are like across all these poems, like the grief of I become a story of the past juxtaposed with the past route always leads me here. And that's stunning. Thank you. Next in our lineup is Naomi Ortiz. Naomi is a poet, writer, facilitator, and visual artist whose intersectional work focuses on self-care for activists, disability justice, climate action, and relationship with place. Ortíz is the author of Sustaining Spirit, Self-Care for Social Justice, published by Reclamation Press, a nonfiction book for diverse communities on dealing with the risks of burnout. They are a 2021 to 2022 Border Narrative Grant awardee for their multidisciplinary project, Complicating Conversations. Ortíz is a 2019 Zoe Glacia Poetry Fellow whose poems have been nominated for Best of the Internet and listed on Entropy's Best of 2020 to 2021 Favorite Poems published online. Their poetry has been published in outlets such as Split This Rock Poem of the Week, About Place Literary Journal, Poems and Numbers, and Vita, performed at events such as the Disability Pride Parade in Chicago, as well as shared through performances around the country. Ortíz is a disabled mestiza living in the Arizona-US-Mexico borderlands, and their website is www.naomiortiz.com. Here is Naomi.
Hello, friends. I'm really excited and have so much gratitude to be here with you. I wonder if it's possible to re-put in the link for the access document to the poems in case people joined late, so they can follow along if they need that. I'm sitting in front of a brown and white serape and a bookcase, and I'm wearing a very cool black sweater with white stars, and I have earrings and red lipstick, and I'm a light-skinned mestiza. I am really grateful to have just soak in this amazing work from folks, and yeah, I have a couple poems to share with you today. One is, I'm so, sorry, I got excited by the poetry before me. And so I'm in that place of being in the audience and just being like, yes. And so I'm overly excited, but so I'm gonna take a deep breath here. And you can join me if you want. Shake it out. So I'm always surprised that folks don't know that there are checkpoints. With as much rhetoric as we have around the border, it's difficult for people to understand what it actually is like living in a place that's policed really heavily from a force that's outside of, regular police by Border Patrol. So this first piece is around that, a story of just going through a checkpoint. 25 miles. In the checkpoint line, my pickup truck idles, windows up, no sudden movements. Cameras attached to transient poles. Agents hold handgun, machine gun, dog's harness. Shade tent threshold pitched up 25 miles from my neighborhood of quinceañeras, first days of preschool, grocery store, errands, and 25 miles from the US-Mexico borderline, at least for today. Military B-10 jet engine rumble, circles, Black Hawk blades. This strip of the world is agitated, always slightly jostling to disorient, to shake us up. My mom and I wait our turn as sticky sweat drips down my brow. I am lulled by the heat, the stop-go shuffle. I forget they probe our sphere, exclaim, I love the bumper sticker on the car in front. So smart to say, driver is deaf. 20 feet away, agent face jerks up from paperwork in his hands, steps 3 feet back, follows my explanation to car backside. Frequency of microphones pointed at our truck cab, picks up our conversation inside, tracks the movement of our lips, tone of our voice, memorizes our faces. Road tremble, plucks my strings, strips protective encasement, pierces at what can be extracted, personal information harvested. There is no boundary. Creep forward, orange cone, halt and wait. Deaf driver makes it through, I ease forward. Green military vest, chest puffed hostility in front of bright spotlight is made silhouette's tone. Even the dog seems to glare. I try to be polite through bile raised at the back of throat. We all grimace into smile. I may answer, where are you going and why? But the fire behind my eyes burns in images week after week of these men who rip away babies, detain, dismantle vehicles, file away lives. Hypervigilance is code for doing one's job, which really means suspicion of what doesn't fit, which translates into green and white truck light flash to stop and see if we belong on this side of the line. The second poem is about courage. I have a current collection around rituals for climate change, just because it's scary. And I feel like ritual historically has offered my ancestors, me, my lineages, so much strength. So this piece is called Ritual for Courage. When I need courage, I draw plants. Like safety can be qualified in drawing, therefore knowing weeds which grow in my yard, at the side of my road, in the arroyo. In this dry, gritty dirt where I sit, life springs up unadorned where animal or wind drops seed in the middle of everything. Pencil lines arch, friction of hand slides over page, shakes loose what scares me. As shape becomes form, confidence is inspired by stems flung open wide to sun. Leaves bend in flow of breeze, shake loose, give themselves some room. Tiny flowers at the end of long pedicle, entire plant smooth to the touch, blue-green leaves notched at the margin. Later learn leaves edible, medicinal herb. Papalo galite, a practice to learn the secrets behind a name. Fortitude unearthed by greeting what lives at my feet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I love the idea of a ritual for courage. I feel like I need that in my life. And the first poem, I just was so struck by how much you conveyed the suffocating environment of the Border Patrol death machine that is the border. In contrast with all the life being lived and beauty and joy that's also people living their lives. Thank you. Thank you. So our last panelist of the evening is Aurora Levins Morales. I want to extend a special thank you to Aurora for being here. You've been a long time and important influence in our communities of disabled and Latinx writers and movement workers. And it feels so vital to also have intergenerational spaces to think together on the histories that have gotten us here and what the work ahead of us is. And your book, Medicine Stories, was one of the earlier books I encountered in my own chronic illness journey and has been really central to my thinking about illness and disability as politically and historically shaped experiences rather than things to be understood as individual pathologies. Your many years of work and thought have sustained me, so thank you for that. Aurora Levins Morales is a Puerto Rican Ashkenazi essayist, poet and fiction writer, movement elder, and liberationist. Her most recent books are Silt, Prose Poems, and Medicine Stories, Essays for Radicals. She lives in Indira Alta, Maricao, in the western mountains of Boriken, where she stewards 34 acres of subtropical rainforest and writes. You can support her work and access her unpublished writing at www.patreon.com/Aurora Levins Morales. Here is Aurora.
Hola, good evening, everyone. I am a light-skinned Puerto Rican woman with shoulder-length brown hair. I'm wearing dangly silver earrings. Behind me is a creative clutter that includes a shelf of baskets, a bookcase with small pieces of art, and a windowsill altar to my creative life. Most of the work that I'm most excited about is prose poetry that is too long to read in the time we have tonight. But I found two shorter poems to share with you. The first is from my book, Kindling, Writings on the Body. Nobody in a long-term relationship with the medical industrial system needs this introduced. Patience. Why do they call us the patient? We are not patient, we endure. The anxious tedium of public hospital waiting rooms, because waiting is the punishment of the poor. Interminable buses to inconvenient places where we count up our cash, calculating whether we can take a cab home instead of riding our exhaustion. The angry contempt of specialists taught to believe any pain they cannot explain is insubordinate, deliberate, offensive. We are not patient. We are denied. Not medically necessary, they say, not proven. Feel free to appeal. We are experts at appealing. So we begin again, gathering documents, faxing releases, collecting letters and signatures, giving our numbers, all our numbers, to dozens of indifferent underpaid clerks, stacking up evidence for the hearing where we will declare as civilly as we can to the affronted panels that it is necessary that we breathe, sleep, digest, be eased of pain, have medicines and therapies and machines, and that we not be required to beg. While I am waiting, I am using my pen, steadily altering words. Where the card says medically indigent, I cross it out and write indignant. Where my records say chemically sensitive, I write chemically assaulted, chemically wounded, chemically outraged. On the form listing risk factors for cancer, I write in my candidates. Agribusiness, air fresheners, dry cleaning, river water, farm life, bathing, drinking, eating, vinyl, cosmetics, plastic, greed. I am making an intricate graffiti poem out of mountains of unnecessary paperwork. Where the doctor has written disheveled, I write untamed. Where it says refuse treatment, I write refuse to be lied to. Where it says safe, side effects minimal, I say prove it. What do you mean minimal? What do you mean side? I write unmarketed effects unmentionable. Where it asks authorization, I write inherent, authorized from birth. Are you the patient, she asks, ready to transfer my call. I say only with my own sweet, brave body. I say not today, no, I have no patience left. I am the person who is healing, I say, in spite of everything. I will have to put you on hold, she says. Yes, hold me, I say. That would be good. I did start that poem in a waiting room. This second piece came out of my morning free writes, unpolished and new. Aging female bodies are subject to all kinds of rejection and scorn, as if growing older were in and of itself a defect, a failure, a job poorly done, as if the details of aging bodies were shameful. Moving out of the cohort of sexual objectification is often very relaxing, but it also reclassifies us as invisible and unimportant. This writing began because of some mysterious breast pain and led to my scanning the history of my breasts with curiosity and respect. A poem about breasts. They emerged from my chest and my back curled over to shelter them from the gaze of men and lower me so I would not be taller than the small jibaro fathers of my friends. It wasn't a time of bras. It was a time of loose fabric. I don't remember my first bra. It didn't matter. I had already been ravaged. I remember the shadowy chicken house, the sex play of girls who had been touched, how after her mouth on my nipple, I thought I would get cancer in that breast. How they swelled above my swelling belly, how I went from a C cup to sizes I didn't know were possible. Double G cantaloupes needing slings to hold them. I wanted my brother to make me a t-shirt that said Dairy Queen. The milk made them solid rock and came so hard and fast it choked her newborn throat. Hot compresses and having to ease it out, that thin, sweet nourishment until it could flow instead of spurt. But I could still hit her father with the spray from across the room. I was that bountiful. Sitting in the wicker rocking chair while her tiny mouth pulled threads of gold from my core, entranced. Age 9, asking my mother why hers hung down instead of standing up, and she said it was time that reshaped them, watching my own move earthward, a slow landslide. The pain shoots through the tissue, lurks in the nodal edges, aches, burns, moves sharply from chamber to chamber, feels like liquid moving through tight spaces. I knead the bread of them, work them, making circles with fingertips all around the rim and up into my armpits. The pain is symmetrical, lumpless, aches and burns and pulls, moving in from the axillary lymph nodes. No diagnosis, just a deep inflamed hurting. They have done their biological work, fed the young, given pleasures I barely remember. So I tend them like fine leather, working the oil in, cherishing them, asking them, what will you be now? Punto.
Thank you so much. Feel free to turn on your screens and clap or offer the love. I think I forgot to say that after Naomi. I'm so sorry. So please show the love to both Naomi and Aurora. Wow, I'm still just thinking about chemically outraged and side effects. Like, what do you mean side? And put you on hold and hold me, and just how that poem reimagines the vocabularies of the waiting room so powerfully. Thank you. There's so many tremendously powerful moments in all of these readings, and I just want to carry them with me into the spring. I think we're going to go till 7:15 or so. So we have some time for the audience to ask questions. If you want to ask a question, you can type your questions into the chat box. I think in this particular Zoom formation, you can also raise your hand, I believe. And maybe while people are thinking about what they might want to ask, I'll start us off with a question. I just coming back to the relationship between body and land, the body as land, land as body. I was thinking about the fact that all of us on this panel tonight are born and raised in very distinct places and also have different ancestral backgrounds. And I'm wondering if any of you would want to speak to how those specific places are shaping your work and just your thinking about this relationship between body and land.
I'll speak to that. I was born and raised where I now live until the age of 13, on an abandoned coffee farm in a subtropical rainforest. And I saw the land and my body be impacted by the same colonial forces. I saw pesticides ravaging the land, and I got epilepsy. My mother got multiple myeloma, both of them connected to specific chemicals being used on that land. So they've never been separable for me. And in the 52 years that I lived away from Puerto Rico, my full body, mind longing for this ecosystem shaped a lot of my writing. And it's interesting to be back here with all those years of mostly urban living in the United States, and to be recalibrating and thinking about the impact of that. But to me, they've always been inseparable. And my mother, who was also a writer, Rosario Morales, had a similar fusion of land and body in her writing.
Thank you. Any of the others want to say anything?
I can say something. This is Ximena. I was born in Brooklyn, and I'm from New York City, but both of my parents immigrated to the US from Mexico, and they're both from different parts of Puebla, a town called Ahuehuetitla and another town called Olomatlan, which I had been to when I was a child. And I think I'm always kind of writing about the disconnect and what was lost from my family's history when my parents crossed the border to the US, and that grief of not knowing a lot about my family's history, my family's town, but I have been trying to reconnect with family members recently, but I think because I am a trans woman, that facet of my identity, or the way that I navigate the world, also creates a tension in a culture that is deeply misogynist and machista. So it's complicated, and I think that shows up in my writing.
Thank you.
I can share a little bit about that too. This is Naomi. I am incredibly fortunate to be born and live in land outside the city that is fairly intact, in the sense of not having been paved over and regrown. I live in the Sonoran Desert, and so it's a very, very slow growing ecosystem and environment, which offers so many gifts in terms of getting to witness what an intact ecosystem can look like. And I'll say, it's changing so quickly with mining and other, I think a lot of people think of the West as these wide open spaces that can just be there for extraction. But there's these really incredibly valuable ecosystems here too. And for me, I gain a lot of strength from being able to witness how plants that are like hundreds of years older than I am have survived and interact with each other and the land and have these really amazing mechanisms of growth and being able to match the ecosystem it's in, even as it gets more and more stressed. We'll see. But I find a lot of learning and growth, and I write about that in a lot of my work.
Thank you.
I guess I'll also answer the question. This is Diannely. Thinking about like the body as land. Oddly enough, I was actually born with this pretty, big birthmark on my body, and it actually covered one of my legs and left the other leg light colored. So I have basically born with two different colored legs. One was really light, one was pretty dark. And it was like an even line all the way up my stomach to my belly button. And I've always felt like I literally, my body was carrying my ancestry. Like it was so visible right there, being Dominican and American, being, African, Taino, and Spanish, all those things mixed together. And my body was physically expressing that. And it was kind of confused as to what pigment it should be. And I've always found that to be kind of almost like the genesis of my, needing to write. I needed to figure out, where I belonged. I didn't quite feel like I fit in entirely. And, having that birthmark really was just like, okay, like I need to, do the work to figure out my identity. And it's kind of just been a driving force for me. Now it's not, the birthmark itself isn't quite as visible, but there's still that distinct line on my stomach. And, it'll be there for the rest of my life. And it's always going to be that reminder of my many identities and how like I just carry all of that with me all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I see a question in the chat box of what advice would you give to aspiring poets? Any advice on creative practices or how to find your voice? Would anybody like to respond to that?
I feel like I'm still finding my voice. It's always, I think it's changing too, with time. So just allowing for that flexibility. And also I think when I read, I find that I become just a more creative writer, or a writer with influence, I think. So just writing, I guess, and allowing for that flexibility.
I'm glad to hear. I'm excited. This is Naomi. I'm excited to hear everybody's answer to this because I feel like I always also need this advice, the answers. Which one of us doesn't? I think for me, one of the best creative practices is listening to my body, listening to nature, listening to the laughter in the other room, of family, just listening. It's been really incredibly helpful to generate and create work.
I do a lot of one-on-one mentoring of writers, and I find that it boils down a lot of the time to the same advice, just worded differently, which is trust yourself. Trust that what you have to say matters. notice how your body responds to your drafts. If you're fudging something, your body will know and call you out about it. I first started teaching writing kind of to democratize the space around me. And I found myself really assuming that any writing that felt cliched, that felt uninspiring, was really camouflage on top of a truth that people were not yet feeling ready to share. And so I would say, give prompts like The Story I Can Never Tell Is, and have people working on what in their lives had caused them to hold back on saying their truth. And that's advice I still give both myself and others. I constantly use my body's reactions as a compass. And I think all of us face the struggle to stay authentic, to not try to write somebody else's book, to not get pulled off center by imagined criticism. So it all boils down to trust yourself in every single way you can imagine. That's my advice. Your voice is there. It's excavate it.
Diannely, did you want to chime in?
Sure. This is Diannely. I guess to kind of add to that, one thing that I've found really helpful for me is just instilling an aspect of play into, writing poetry. I think especially considering the topics that I write about, being pretty heavy ones, mental illness, disability, violence, sexual abuse, those types of things. It's hard sometimes to want to sit down and write about those things, even though, at least for me, it's so cathartic and necessary. But sometimes I have to come at it at, a different angle, and allow myself to, and remind myself also that not only is my poetry about, sharing these experiences and, and also in the hopes that others will share their own and, to kind of, find that, kinship and kindredness with others. I need to remind myself that I also just love language. And I have since I was a little girl, and words are fucking awesome, and just like the way we put them together to create an image or, to create sounds. And it's so awe-inspiring, language. And then also, being bilingual, like, wow, like we have two languages, or at least some of us, have two languages, or maybe even three languages, who knows, to be able to play with. So that's kind of where the diary entry poems, became so important to me, because although I was writing about these really serious topics, I gave myself the opportunity to, collect language from these journals and then just put together all the pieces, like little Legos, like, almost Tetris, if you will, grabbing, a line from that page and grabbing a line from this page and putting it together and just seeing what, strangeness and beauty I could make out of that. And I think that's one way that I've actually found my voice, is reminding myself that it's also about the fact that I love language so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. We are out of time, but I want to just also thank our audience for your presence, for joining us tonight. And let's give another round of applause to our panelists, please. Thank you all for your offerings this evening. And I'm wishing you all well.